listen up, because what I'm about to tell you is going to hit harder than anything you've heard today. A famous spy, a legendary assassin feared by entire nations, a trained agent who was built to be unshakable, is freaking out. And not because of an enemy, a weapon, or a mission gone wrong. He's losing control because of you. In a past war, your darkest season, you faced him and destroyed him so completely that he still can't explain how you walked out while his entire world collapsed. And now when he tries to confront you again, when he tries to pull the trigger on your confidence, your progress, your rise, he freezes. He sees the same vision of his own defeat, the same collapse of everything he thought he was. The agent who once never missed a shot now refuses to even take one. He's sweating, shaking, terrified to step into your shadow because deep down he knows the truth. He already lost to you once, and he won't survive a second round. Before we go deeper into this dark, powerful message, pause this video, hit that like button, subscribe so we can hit 50,000 subscribers, and drop the number 11 in the comments to show you're locked in. If you're really built for this, you'll watch until the end, because something in you already knows this message is yours. Now, let's get into it. He was a ghost in human skin, an assassin whispered about in backroom meetings, feared by governments, hunted by no one, because no one survived long enough to try. His presence alone was enough to silence entire armies. His name caused diplomats to rethink their alliances, and yet all of that unstoppable confidence crumbled into dust the moment he heard your name spoken aloud. Because in the cold chamber of his memory, you were the one person he could never erase. Every life he took, every mission he finished, every enemy he buried, none of them left a mark on him. But you did. You carved a wound in his pride so deep he still flinched when he thought about it. A wound that kept him awake despite years of pretending it didn't exist. He could face bullets, bombs, blades, and broken bones without blinking. But the idea of meeting you again made his heartbeat stagger, as if his body remembered something his mind refused to speak. Fear was a stranger to him until he met you. He once claimed that no man could scare him, no warrior could shake him. But when he looked into your eyes during that war, he didn't see a soldier. He saw his death, clear as daylight, written in a way that made his blood freeze. It wasn't the look of anger or hatred. It was something calm, something inevitable, as if you weren't fighting him, but simply ending what was already predetermined. For years, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe the battlefield smoke played tricks with his mind. But the truth remained. In that moment, staring at you, he felt like prey. And the assassin who hunted nations suddenly knew what it meant to be hunted himself. The vision returned every time he tried to analyze that moment. Your silhouette, his own body falling, the coldness of the ground as he slipped into an imagined death. It never changed. And deep down, he understood. It wasn't imagination. It was a warning. When he confronted you again after the war, the world expected a legendary clash. Two titans facing off in a storm of violence and skill. But something impossible happened. He raised his weapon, and then his finger froze. He couldn't pull the trigger, not because he lacked the skill. He had killed with colder hands and heavier consequences, but because the image of his own death flashed again, sharp and merciless. It wasn't the gun that betrayed him. It was his memory. His brain screamed at him that this moment had already happened, that fate had already written the ending. And every instinct he possessed warned him that you were not someone to provoke a second time. He wasn't afraid of dying. He'd come close to it countless times. What terrified him was the certainty of it. He lowered the gun not out of mercy, but out of self-preservation. Because a man who survives on instinct knows better than to ignore the one instinct that has never once been wrong. The instinct that told him you were death itself, wrapped in human shape. He wasn't supposed to sweat. His training made him a machine, emotionless, unshakable, calculated. But the moment he stepped into the same dimly lit corridor as you, sweat pooled along the edge of his jawline. His breaths came fractionally sharper, as if the air around you carried weight. He scanned the shadows, recalculated every exit route, tested the grip of his weapon, habits that usually grounded him. Yet none of them worked. His mind was too busy reliving the battlefield, hearing your footsteps behind him, recalling the terrifying accuracy with which you dismantled him the first time. Anyone watching would have been confused. How could the strongest man in the intelligence world tremble in the eye presence of a single person? But his fear was not a reaction. It was a memory trying to protect him from repeating the same mistake twice. Every legend has a weak spot. His weak spot was the truth he tried desperately to bury. He couldn't beat you, and legends don't handle weakness well. So he built excuses, invented stories, pretended you had been lucky, that he had been surprised, that the war had drained him. But none of those lies survived the silence of night. He had defeated generals, taken down criminal empires, outsmarted military strategists. Yet the moment he thought of your face in that battlefield smoke, all of those victories felt insignificant. You weren't an obstacle he could overcome. You were a boundary he could never cross again. It wasn't your strength that broke him. It was the realization that your power didn't need explanation. It simply was. And he, a man defined by victories, had found the one battle he was destined to lose. He remembers how the ground trembled beneath your feet, how the battlefield seemed to bend around your presence. You moved with a precision he had never encountered, silent, relentless, unstoppable. While others fought desperately for survival, you fought with the clarity of someone fulfilling destiny. When he attacked, he expected the usual dance of violence, a counter, a dodge, a struggle. But there was no struggle. You dismantled him with the ease of flicking away a threat too small to matter. There was no hesitation in your strikes, no mercy in your decisions, and that terrified him more than the pain itself, because mercy is something humans expect from humans. But what he faced that day was something beyond human, something that didn't recognize him as an equal, only as a target. Every time he thought he had buried the memory, it clawed its way back up. The flashback didn't come softly. It slammed into him with the force of an explosion. He would see your silhouette breaking through the smoke, your footsteps deliberate, your eyes fixed on him like a predator who had already made its decision. In those moments, he wasn't the assassin feared by governments. He was just a man gasping for breath, trying to understand how someone like you existed. His body reacted before his mind could, fingers trembling, knees weakening, vision blurring. It was the involuntary reaction of someone who had experienced true fear once and could never unlearn it. He tried therapy, training, isolation. Nothing worked, because the enemy living inside his mind was not a memory, it was you. He had been trained to eliminate fear the way one eliminates a threat, quickly, efficiently, without hesitation. But you weren't a threat he could eliminate. You were a reality he couldn't escape. And reality changes people. He found himself checking corners twice, flinching at shadows, jumping at sounds that never bothered him before. Every instinct he had mastered over decades now betrayed him. His agency thought he was losing his edge, but he knew the truth. He was losing the illusion that he was invincible. He wasn't born a coward. You made him remember what it felt like to be one. He erased the mission logs. He destroyed the surveillance footage. He silenced everyone who knew what really happened in that war. because admitting the truth would shatter the legend he built. He lost. Completely. Brutally. Unforgettably. There were no witnesses left except him and you. And that made it worse. You didn't need to brag. You didn't need to taunt. Your silence was louder than victory. It told him that the fight meant nothing to you, while it haunted every corner of his mind. He carries that shame like a brand. And even now, when the world calls him unstoppable, he knows he was stopped once, and will be stopped again if he ever crosses your path. His mind had been conditioned to resist torture, brainwashing, psychological manipulation. But it wasn't tactics or chemicals that broke him. It was the unbearable truth of his own powerlessness. He replayed the fight thousands of times, searching for a mistake, a moment where he could have changed his fate. But fate gave him nothing. Your presence became a puzzle he couldn't solve. Every explanation he imagined fell apart under scrutiny. You weren't stronger by luck. You were stronger by nature. And that violated everything he believed about skill, training, and supremacy. The realization that someone like you existed didn't just frighten him. It shattered the foundation of who he thought he was. His agency assigned him to eliminate you. They thought he was the only one capable of completing the task. Ironically, he agreed, because he wanted to prove to himself he wasn't afraid. But the moment he saw you walk into the abandoned factory, all the courage he tried to rehearse evaporated instantly. He didn't even pretend to prepare for combat. He turned around, walked out, and lied to his superiors about losing the trail. His reputation took a hit, but he didn't care. Survival was worth far more than pride. Deep inside, he knew that taking another mission involving you wasn't bravery. It was suicide. The vision came again, his body falling, your shadow towering over him, the silence that followed. It wasn't just fear, it was prophecy, and it ripped away any illusion that he could rewrite the ending. He wasn't someone who believed in destiny. He believed in bullets, blades, and accuracy. But the vision was undeniable. The details never changed, never softened. It felt less like imagination and more like memory, leaking from a future he was destined to walk into. He retreated, not because he wanted to, but because the universe showed him the price of staying. Agents across the world wondered what could make a man like him abandon a mission. They guessed politics, betrayal, injury. No one ever considered the truth, that he had seen death, and death wore your face. He didn't argue, didn't negotiate, didn't ask for a reassignment. He simply backed down. A man who stood tall before armies now stepped aside for a single soul. And in that moment, he accepted something far more terrifying than defeat, respect born from fear. Because fear, when deep enough, transforms into reverence. He knows there are battles worth fighting and battles worth surviving. Facing you offers neither. It only promises one ending, a silent fall, a final breath, a death he already lived through once in his mind. He chose life, chose escape, chose to protect the legend he still had left. Because the world may call him unstoppable, but he knows stopping isn't the same as surviving. And you are the one force he cannot survive. He doesn't avoid you because he's weak. He avoids you because every instinct he trusts tells him you are the end of the road. His fear isn't rooted in possibility. It's rooted in memory, a memory so vivid it feels like a life he already lost. When he looks at you, he doesn't see a threat. He sees a moment that has already happened, a moment where his story ended under your shadow. Maybe it wasn't literal death, maybe it was symbolic, but to him, it felt real enough to scar his soul, and scars don't lie. So when he faces you, he trembles, not because he fears dying, but because, in his mind, he already has. There was a moment, small, almost forgettable, when everything inside you finally cracked. It wasn't dramatic, no explosion of screams or chaos. It was a quiet shift, a silent breaking that only you felt. But that silence was more dangerous than any roar, because it marked the birth of something the world wasn't prepared to witness. Rage didn't just enter you. It claimed you, reshaping your bones, rewiring your heartbeat, and turning your soul into something sharper than steel. You stopped being a victim of circumstances the day you embraced that fire. Rage made you stronger, faster, hungrier. It gave you a reason to stand taller than every person who ever tried to bury you. People say anger clouds judgment, but for you, it did the opposite. It made your vision crystal clear. You saw every enemy, every betrayal, every wound in perfect detail, as if life itself was daring you to strike back. And you didn't hesitate. You carved your path with the fury they planted in you, letting every injustice become a weapon. The rage didn't destroy you. The world did. Rage only rebuilt what was left. Weapons break. Bullets run out. Blades snap in the cold. But darkness never leaves you. It grows. It breathes. It learns your rhythm and drags you into places you never knew you could step into. Yours became a living thing, obedient, loyal, and hungry. Not even the most trained assassin could predict what a soul like yours would do when cornered. You didn't create your darkness out of choice. It was carved into you, piece by piece, by every lie, every betrayal, every second someone underestimated you. And when the world finally pushed too hard, the darkness rose. Not to protect you, but to avenge you. It was patient until it wasn't. Once unleashed, it became a storm, with your voice, your hands, your thirst for retribution. Those who thought they understood you realized too late that you were no longer a person, fighting shadows. You were the shadow itself, something untouchable, unstoppable, and terrifying in its silence. They tried to break you with bullets, with threats, with fear. They thought they could extinguish the fire burning in your chest, but fire doesn't die when you try to suffocate it. It spreads. The harder they pushed, the brighter you burned, until every attempt to tame you only fed your fury. Your fire didn't come from arrogance. It came from survival. Every flame in you was born from pain you endured, losses you swallowed, and promises you swore with blood in your mouth. You didn't want to be unstoppable. You simply refused to be erased. And that refusal became a weapon no assassin could match. In the end, the killers they sent weren't battling a human. They were standing in front of a wild fire. One that had waited too long to blaze through everything standing in its way. Anger was just the beginning. Over time, it changed its shape, transforming from an emotional burn into something heavier, something sharper, a hunger, a need, a craving for power so intense it made your hands tremble, not with fear, but with ambition. You realized that power wasn't an option. It was the only shield you'd ever trust again. You studied the world differently once the hunger took root. Every person became a chess piece. Every opportunity became a stepping stone. You no longer reacted, you strategized. You no longer hoped, you expected. The anger that once blinded you now fueled every move you made, turning you from a survivor into a tactician with a dark purpose. The world didn't stand a chance once you decided you wanted power, not for glory, not for vanity, but because power was the only language the world ever respected. There was a final moment of innocence in you, a moment where you still believed mercy was a strength. That moment died the night someone you trusted used your mercy against you. It wasn't the betrayal that changed you. It was your reaction to it. You realized too late that sparing enemies only teaches them how to hurt you again. So you stripped mercy out of your system, piece by piece, until your heart felt lighter without it. You learned to see people without illusions, without softness, without the hopeful lies that once blinded your judgment. And in that cold clarity, you discovered freedom. Freedom from guilt, from hesitation, from the weight of empathy. From that night on, you never hesitated again. Mercy didn't make you human. The lack of it made you powerful. There were days when the weight of everything you'd endured pressed so hard on your chest that breathing felt like a chore. Days when the world seemed determined to crush what was left of you. But one thing kept you alive: vengeance. It was not a choice, but a necessity, the force keeping your heart beating when everything else failed. You didn't fantasize about revenge. You built it brick by careful brick. You memorized the faces of those who wronged you. You crafted plans so intricate that even fate wouldn't dare interfere. Every morning you woke up with one purpose: to take back everything they stole from you, even if you had to do it with your bare hands. You didn't survive for peace. You survived for payback. And that purpose was stronger than any force trying to stop you. The world likes to pretend monsters are born, but you learned the truth. They're made, shaped by whispered lies, forged by broken promises, sculpted by the sharp edges of pain. And when you were at your lowest, the shadows didn't frighten you. They welcomed you, whispering truths the light never dared reveal. Those whispers weren't commands. They were realizations. They told you what you already knew deep down, that kindness had failed you, that loyalty was a joke, that trust was poison. And slowly, you embraced what you were becoming, not because you wanted to be feared, but because becoming a monster was the only way to survive a world full of monsters pretending to be human. You didn't fall into darkness. You walked into it with your head high. You once stood at a crossroads, soaked in hurt, trembling with exhaustion. And in that fragile moment, you made a promise, not to the world, not to your enemies, but to yourself. A promise carved from pain, sealed in silence, and echoed in every breath you took afterward. Never again. Never again would you bow. Never again would you break. Never again would you let your heart become a weapon for others to use against you. It was a vow more sacred than any oath spoken in daylight. It became your anchor, your resurrection, your identity. Breaking that promise would mean returning to the version of yourself that suffered. And that part of you is dead now, buried, burned, forgotten. Pain was supposed to destroy you. They expected that. They hoped for it. But instead of collapsing under the weight of everything you endured, you absorbed it. You collected every tear, every bruise, every scar, and you fed them to the fire inside your chest until the line between hurt and hunger blurred completely. Pain didn't weaken you. It reshaped you. It sharpened your senses, hardened your will, and twisted your motivations into something primal. Sometimes people call it madness, but madness is just another word for a mind that refuses to break the way others expect. Pain didn't push you over the edge. It taught you how to walk on it. Justice was a dream you once believed in, something distant but beautiful. You thought fairness mattered, that truth would rise, that the world would eventually right itself. That illusion shattered the day they crossed a line you didn't know existed. After that, you didn't want balance. You wanted destruction. You learned that justice leaves enemies breathing. Ruin leaves legacies erased. You didn't want apologies or explanations. You wanted everything they built to crumble, every name tied to your suffering to fade into ash. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Justice may bring closure, but ruin brings silence. And after what they did, silence was the only ending they deserved. Love made you soft. Fear made you powerful. It wasn't a philosophy. It was experience carved into your spine. The people you loved betrayed you. The people who feared you obeyed. Love demanded vulnerability. Fear demanded respect. And respect was something no one could take away once earned. You didn't stop loving because you couldn't. You stopped loving because love was a weapon pointed at your own heart. Fear, on the other hand, was armor, unbreakable, undeniable, priceless. You realize the world doesn't care about your softness. It only responds to your strength. So you chose fear, and the world finally took you seriously. Every betrayal left a scar, and every scar taught you a new lesson. You didn't crumble under the weight of disappointment. You evolved. What others saw as heartbreak became blueprints for your transformation. You learned how to read people, how to predict their lies, how to hear the truth they tried to hide behind their smiles. You didn't become colder. You became smarter. Betrayal turned emotion into analysis, trust into caution, hope into strategy. And the more you learned, the deadlier you became. You stopped warning people when they crossed lines. You just stopped giving them the chance to do it twice. You became the nightmare they accidentally created. At first, they ran from you, shaking, terrified, desperate to escape. But running didn't save them. Running only prolonged their fear. Eventually, they learned something far more horrifying. You caught everyone, no matter how far they fled, no matter what shadows they hid in. You found them. Now they don't run. They drop to their knees the second your shadow touches them. Their voices shake, begging for mercy you swore never to give again. In their eyes, you see a reflection of what you've become, an unstoppable force birthed from everything they once thought made you weak. You didn't ask for their fear, but you earned it. When the world goes quiet and the darkness sinks deeper, there's a rhythm inside you that refuses to rest. Your heartbeat doesn't sound like a pulse. It sounds like a war drum. It's the echo of every battle you survived, every wound you endured, every vow you made. Each beat reminds you of the war you carry inside, a war that shaped your identity and fueled your transformation. It's not rage anymore. It's purpose. It's not fear. It's momentum. While others sleep peacefully, your heart trains for the next fight, the next move, the next enemy foolish enough to stand in your way. Your heartbeat isn't a reminder that you're alive. It's a reminder that you're not done. People love to paint destiny as something gentle, something poetic. Yours was nothing like that. Your destiny wasn't written in stars, it was written in scars. You didn't stumble into darkness, you chose it, you embraced it, you built your kingdom within it. You realized too late that they never feared you enough. They underestimated you, mocked you, hurt you, because they never believed you had the strength to become more than a wounded soul. So, you transformed yourself into the very thing they dreaded, the force they whispered about, the monster they should have feared before it was too late. You didn't let destiny shape you. You shaped destiny with your own hands and forged it in fire.